It was a quiet evening in the White House, the kind of rare moment when President Donald J. Trump could lean back in his chair, sipping on a Diet Coke and take a deep breath. The country was running like a well-oiled machine, as he liked to say. But as he admired the golden glow of Washington, D.C. from his office window, the phone on his desk buzzed with an urgent, private call. Only a handful of people had access to this direct line. He answered, his voice sharp and commanding. "Mr. President, this is Admiral Jonathan Hayes," a deep voice responded. "We have an emergency situation. It requires your immediate attention." Trump leaned forward, intrigued. "Admiral, I hope this is as big as you're making it sound. I've got a country to run. What's the deal?" There was a pause on the other end. Then the Admiral spoke in a hushed tone. "Sir, we've uncovered a classified military asset. Something off the books. Something we never authorized." Trump raised an eyebrow. "Are you telling me we have an illegal military operation running without my knowledge?" "It's worse than that, Mr. President," Admiral Hayes said gravely. "It's a nuclear-powered submarine, and we have no idea where it came from. The forbidden waters." Within the hour, Trump was airborne on Marine One, heading toward a remote naval base along the East Coast. The helicopter touched down in the darkness, the roar of the blades muffling the hurried voices of military personnel below. Admiral Hayes greeted him personally, a tall man with a no-nonsense demeanor. "Sir, we found the submarine 3 miles off the coast of Virginia. It surfaced without warning, no radio signals, no prior records. We scrambled a team to investigate, but..." "But what?" Trump demanded, stepping out of the chopper. "They never came back." Trump narrowed his eyes. "You're telling me a submarine just appears out of nowhere, and our guys go in but never come out? What kind of horror movie are we talking about here?" The Admiral gestured toward the dock, where a sleek, black vessel loomed against the water. "We need answers, Mr. President. And we need them now." Trump nodded. "All right, let's get to the bottom of this. I'm going in." "Sir, I must advise against it." Trump waved him off. "I don't take advice. I give it. Now let's go." As he approached the submarine, a chilling breeze swept across the dock. The air felt different, almost electric. And then, as he stepped onto the vessel, something eerie happened. The lights flickered and the air around him seemed to hum. Something was waiting inside. Something that would change everything. Trump stepped through the submarine's steel hatch, his polished shoes clicking against the damp metal floor. The air inside was heavy, thick with a strange, almost metallic scent. The interior was dimly lit with only a few flickering lights lining the narrow passageways. Admiral Hayes and 2 heavily armed Navy SEALs followed closely behind. Their weapons were raised, scanning the eerie silence. The moment the hatch shut behind them, an unsettling sound echoed through the vessel, a faint, distant tapping like someone drumming their fingers against steel. "Okay, this is creepy," Trump muttered, adjusting his red tie. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny. I've been in a lot of buildings, a lot of rooms, some of the best, believe me, but this one? It's got bad energy." One of the SEALs, Lieutenant Carter, turned toward him. "Sir, our team entered the sub 2 hours ago. They haven't responded since. Their last transmission was cut off mid-sentence." Trump nodded. "All right, let's find them. And let's find out who parked this thing here." They moved cautiously down the corridor, past sealed-off compartments and rows of strange, outdated control panels. The technology inside looked old, far older than it should have been for a modern nuclear submarine. And then they saw it. Lying in the middle of the passageway was a man in a Navy uniform, one of their missing crew members. He was motionless, face down, his fingers curled as if he had been clawing at the floor. Admiral Hayes crouched beside him, checking for a pulse. He shook his head. "He's gone." Trump's face hardened. What the hell happened to him? Before anyone could answer, the flickering lights suddenly stabilized, glowing brighter than before. The entire submarine seemed to power up. The control panels came alive, screens displaying rows of cryptic symbols and codes that none of them recognized. And then, a voice crackled through the ship's speakers. It was distorted, ghostly, but unmistakably human. "You shouldn't have come." The SEALs raised their weapons, spinning in all directions. Trump exhaled sharply. "Okay, that's enough weirdness. Who's talking? Show yourself." No response. Then one of the side doors, locked just seconds ago, slowly creaked open on its own. Beyond it, a dimly lit control room was waiting. And inside, sitting at one of the terminals, was something that made everyone freeze in place. A man. Or rather, the corpse of a man, slumped in the captain's chair, dressed in an old military uniform from the 1950s. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, as if staring straight at them. And beside him, the ship's nameplate caught Trump's eye. USS Atlantis. Admiral Hayes paled. Sir, that's impossible. Trump frowned. Why? Hayes swallowed hard. Because the USS Atlantis disappeared in 1956. Lost at sea. It was never found. Silence. Then the corpse moved. Its head twitched slightly, its jaw shifting as if trying to speak. The speakers crackled again. You need to leave. Before it wakes up. Trump narrowed his eyes. Before what wakes up? The corpse's head jerked as if trying to point at something behind them. And then, bang! A deafening noise rang through the submarine as something heavy slammed against the walls of the vessel. The entire sub lurched as if being shaken by an unseen force. The lights flickered again, this time blood-red emergency lights flooded the passageways. The sound of metal groaning under pressure filled the air, and suddenly the corridors behind them started to close, bulkheads slamming shut, one after another. We need to move. Now. Hayes shouted. Trump didn't argue. He turned and ran, his mind racing. Something else was inside the submarine. Something far worse than a ghostly crew. And it wasn't just waking up. It was hungry. The submarine groaned as if it were alive, the deep metallic creaks echoing through the dimly lit corridors. President Trump, Admiral Hayes, and the SEAL team sprinted forward as the bulkheads behind them slammed shut one after another. Move, move, move. Hayes barked as the team charged toward the command center where the ancient corpse still sat, motionless. Trump was breathing hard but determined. Okay, this is officially the weirdest thing I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot. Trust me. But what the hell is waking up? And why is this sub from the 1950s just floating here like a ghost ship? Lieutenant Carter's voice was tight with fear. Sir, I don't think this submarine is abandoned. Something's still running it. The ship suddenly shuddered as if something massive was shifting deep within. A distant hiss of pressurized air filled the corridor, followed by a low, guttural growl, a sound that was distinctly not mechanical. Trump skidded to a stop. Hold up. Did a submarine just growl at me? The flickering lights above them strobed violently and the ship's old-fashioned control panels sparked with energy. Then the ship's speakers crackled again. It's awake. The voice was different this time. Not the eerie whisper from before, but something colder, robotic. Almost inhuman. Suddenly, the corpse in the captain's chair lurched forward, its jaw snapping open wider than humanly possible. Its lifeless eyes rolled back, and from deep within its throat came a horrific, gurgling sound. Then it spoke. Turn back. The dead man's skeletal fingers twitched as if struggling to move. Then his hand slammed against the control panel and the submarine shifted, tilting slightly to one side. Trump grabbed onto the nearest railing. Okay, this is way beyond anything I signed up for. He turned to Hayes. Admiral, I'm gonna need some answers. Now. Hayes' face was pale. Sir, I think we're dealing with something that shouldn't exist. One of the SEALs, checking his equipment, gasped. Sir, my GPS just went offline. We're being jammed. Another SEAL cursed under his breath. This ship isn't lost, it was never meant to be found. Then, from somewhere deep inside the submarine, they heard a noise that froze everyone in place. A long, wet, inhuman breath. And then, a second one. Something else was in here with them. Something alive. The control panel in front of the dead captain suddenly came alive, displaying strange, unreadable symbols. The screens flickered between static and what looked like biometric readings. Trump squinted at the data flashing in front of him. This looks like a medical scan. Hayes nodded grimly. That's because it is. He turned toward the others. Gentlemen, I think this submarine isn't just a relic. It's a containment unit. Trump's eyes widened. For what? Before Hayes could respond, the ship lurched violently, throwing them against the walls. The metal structure groaned like it was in pain. And then, the door to the lower deck, which had been locked shut, suddenly burst open, revealing a staircase leading down into darkness. A faint, rhythmic clicking sound echoed from below like claws tapping against steel. Then, a whisper. Not from the speakers this time, this was real, coming from below. You came too late. A single, bony hand gripped the bottom of the staircase. Long fingers. Too long. The skin was stretched tight over an elongated frame, veins pulsing with an unnatural glow beneath the surface. It wasn't human. Trump took a slow step back. Okay, that's it. I officially hate submarines. The creature's head emerged, its skin pale and translucent, its hollow, black eyes fixated on them. Its mouth lined with rows of needle-like teeth curled into something that almost resembled a smile. Then, in a voice that barely sounded real, it whispered. Welcome to the future. The creature's elongated body slithered halfway into the corridor. Its skin glistening under the submarine's flickering lights. It stood impossibly tall. its thin limbs twisted at unnatural angles. The air around it seemed to vibrate, as if reality itself rejected its presence. The SEALs raised their weapons. "Permission to fire, sir?" Carter asked, his voice tight with fear. Trump raised a hand. "Hold it. Let's not start blasting unless we have to. We don't know what this thing is, and I'd like to keep knowing what's going on." The creature blinked, its black, soulless eyes locking onto Trump. Then, in a voice that sent a chill down everyone's spine, it spoke again. "You are not supposed to be here." Trump adjusted his suit, cracking his knuckles. "Buddy, I'm the President of the United States. I go where I want." The creature tilted its head slightly. Then, slowly, it pointed toward the dead captain slumped in the chair. "That man," it rasped, "thought the same thing." The room went eerily silent. Admiral Hayes stepped forward, his face grim. "What the hell are you?" The creature's mouth curled into what might have been a grin. "I am what you created." A cold chill ran down Trump's spine. "Excuse me? We don't make things like you. We make deals, we build hotels, and we win elections. That's what we do." The creature took a slow, deliberate step forward. The floor beneath it hissed as if something corrosive leaked from its skin. "The United States," it continued, its voice crackling like an old radio signal, "built this vessel and sealed us inside." Trump's brows furrowed. "You're telling me this submarine wasn't lost? It was buried." The creature nodded. "This was not a warship. This was a prison, a secret project, a failed experiment. And now," it gestured to the flickering control panels, "you have woken us up." The submarine shuddered violently. A low, mechanical hum filled the air, and suddenly, the walls of the vessel began to shift, as if they were alive. Trump turned to Hayes. "Tell me you've got a good explanation for this." The admiral's face was pale. "Sir, if this is what I think it is, we're standing inside something that was supposed to be erased from history." Trump frowned. "Elaborate, and make it quick." Hayes exhaled. "During the 1950s, the military conducted classified bioenhancement projects, experiments on human evolution, designed to create the perfect soldier. But something went wrong. The subjects changed, became something else." Trump shot a glance at the creature. "I'd say that's an understatement." Hayes nodded. "The USS Atlantis wasn't just lost at sea. It was deliberately sunk to keep whatever was inside from ever seeing daylight again." Trump's jaw clenched. "And you're telling me no one thought to mention this to the commander-in-chief?" Before Hayes could answer, the submarine lurched violently, knocking them all off balance. The emergency lights switched to a deep, blood-red hue and the ship's speaker system crackled again. This time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a scream. The walls of the submarine rippled as more figures, tall, thin, unnatural, emerged from the darkness. More of them. Trump steadied himself, brushing off his suit. "Okay, folks. I've been in a lot of tight spots before. But this is next level. We need a way out. And we need it yesterday." Hayes grabbed a radio. "Command, we need an immediate extraction." "Static." The radio hissed, then, in a distorted, familiar voice, it spoke. "There's no escape." Trump turned back to the creature. "Oh yeah? We'll see about that." The president pulled a flare gun from his jacket because of course he carried one and fired directly at the nearest creature. The flare ignited the air, casting a bright red glow across the submarine's walls. The creature shrieked, recoiling from the light. Trump grinned. "Ha! Not a fan of fireworks, huh?" Carter turned to the others. "Sir, if light affects them, we can use that." Hayes nodded. "We need to overload the ship's reactor. We light this place up like the 4th of July and take these things with it." Trump clapped his hands. "Now that's a plan. Let's go melt some freaks." But then, the creature lunged, and the real fight for survival began. The creature lunged with inhuman speed, its elongated limbs snapping toward Trump and the SEALs like a whip. Bang! Bang! Gunfire erupted in the tight corridor, muzzle flashes lighting up the grotesque, twisting form of the monstrosity. The bullet struck, but the creature barely flinched. "Not working," Carter shouted, reloading his rifle. "Great," Trump muttered. "Bulletproof nightmare monsters. Just what I needed today." The submarine shuddered again, this time more violently. The walls themselves pulsated as if the ship was somehow alive. More of the creatures slithered forward from the shadows, their black, soulless eyes locked onto the intruders. "Admiral," Trump barked. "We're on a ticking clock here. How do we fry this thing?" Hayes glanced at the control panel. "We overload the nuclear reactor. But there's a problem." "Of course there is," Trump groaned. "The manual override is in the engine room below deck," Hayes continued. "Someone has to get down there and activate it by hand." Trump sighed, straightening his tie. "Let me guess. That someone is me." Carter glanced at the horde of creatures now crawling toward them. "Sir, we're out of options. If we don't overload the reactor, they're taking this sub back to the surface." Trump narrowed his eyes. "And if that happens?" Hayes looked grim. "Then we just handed over an entire army of creatures from hell to the world." Trump rolled his shoulders. "All right, let's blow this tin can to kingdom come." Descent into the abyss. With the seals covering him, Trump and Hayes raced down the ladder into the submarine's lower levels. The deeper they went, the hotter it became, steam hissing from ruptured pipes, making it feel like they were descending into the underworld itself. The engine room door loomed ahead. It was an old, rusted hatch, the kind that hadn't been opened in decades. Hayes grabbed the wheel and started turning. It groaned in protest. Then, a shadow moved behind them. Trump spun just in time to see one of the creatures clawing through the metal walls, its razor-sharp fingers peeling the steel apart like paper. "Admiral," Trump warned. I know. Hayes grunted, forcing the hatch open. They stumbled inside, slamming the door shut just as the creature lunged. Bang! Its claws ripped through the steel, just inches from Trump's face. "Too close. Way too close," Trump muttered, wiping his brow. Hayes pointed to the reactor controls, an old, analog panel with a single lever marked. "Manual override, do not engage." Trump grinned. "Now that's what I like to see." "Sir," Hayes warned, "once we pull that, we have 5 minutes before this sub goes nuclear." Trump cracked his knuckles. "Then we'd better move fast." With a deep breath, he grabbed the lever and yanked it down. A deafening alarm blared through the submarine. The lights flashed red and an automated voice rang out. "Warning. Reactor overload in 5 minutes. Evacuate immediately." The creatures outside the door shrieked, their wails echoing through the ship. "Time to go," Trump shouted. They raced back to the upper deck where the SEALs were holding the line against a swarm of monsters. The entire submarine was shaking, the reactor humming dangerously. Carter fired another burst into the advancing horde. "Sir, how long do we have?" "For minutes," Hayes yelled back. Trump grabbed a radio. "Evac team, I need an extraction now." The static crackled, then a voice came through. "Chopper inbound. Surface in 2 minutes." "Then let's go," Trump shouted. The team fought their way through the corridors, firing in all directions, pushing back the relentless creatures. The submarine was falling apart, steam bursting from pipes, metal groaning under the pressure of the impending explosion. Escape to the surface. They reached the hatch, but there was a problem. It was jammed. "Are you kidding me?" Trump yelled. "Now's not the time for this crap." Carter slammed the emergency release and the hatch burst open, revealing the dark ocean above. But the creatures weren't done. One of them lunged from the shadows, its claws reaching for Trump. At the last second, Carter shoved him out of the way, but the creature grabbed Carter instead. "No!" Hayes roared. Carter locked eyes with the president. "Get out of here, sir. Now." Then, with one last, desperate move, he pulled a grenade from his vest, yanked the pin, and tackled the creature into the darkness. The explosion rocked the ship, sending debris flying. Trump gritted his teeth, rage burning in his chest. But he didn't have time to grieve. He had to move. With seconds left, Trump, Hayes, and the remaining SEALs climbed into the escape pod, slamming the door shut just as the submarine's core melted down. The final detonation. The pod shot up toward the surface. Through the tiny window, Trump watched as the USS Atlantis and the horrors inside it were swallowed by a blinding explosion. The shockwave followed them up, sending bubbles and debris shooting past like torpedoes. Then silence. The pod breached the surface and the team gasped for air. A helicopter hovered above, searchlights piercing the night. As they were hauled aboard, Trump looked back at the ocean, at the giant mushroom cloud rising from below. "It's done," Hayes murmured. Trump exhaled, shaking his head. "Somehow I feel like this isn't over." Epilogue: The Unfinished Nightmare. Hours later, aboard Air Force One, Trump sat in his private office, a glass of whiskey in hand. He stared at the classified USS Atlantis file on his desk. A single phrase had been scrawled at the bottom in red ink. "They were never meant to stay buried." Trump narrowed his eyes. "Oh, fantastic." Just then, the lights flickered.